Today we're talking about, what about country girls? You might think, well, that's an odd topic for a message. Well, it might be, except for this whole series is kind of odd for most people because it's not really a churchy type ministry message that most people even talk about. In fact, it's really bringing those things to light that need to be said more often, and that's to begin to confess our sins, confess our faults, confess our inabilities, so that we can really see that ministers aren't to be put on pedestals. I mean, they should be reverenced in some way, but really they're just average people, and sometimes not even altogether they're average. Sometimes their world's been rocked so bad they are probably more dependent upon Jesus than anyone else. And really, when you get down to it, I have to believe that's why ministers become ministers. They get so fed up with trying to be something that the world expects them to be that they realize, I can't do this without Jesus, and I can't do anything without Jesus, so I'll just lean on Jesus. And then people think we're weak. No, we're just humble and meek and letting him have his right. Since he purchased us with his shed blood, he bought us for a price, so we don't belong to ourselves anyway, especially those who are ministers of the gospel. So we just do what he says, and therefore that's why I'm doing this series, Confessions of a Prophet, to carry on some of those informational points about myself, and there's some reasons for that. One of the reasons why I'm going through my personal life like this and unloading some of these things that would never be known to you other than if I told you myself. In fact, some of the things I'm telling, even my children don't know. But, there's no reason to go around blabbing about everything that happened in your life, but there is a reason for why I'm doing this, Confessions of a Prophet. And here's one of them, the main one, is to reveal the weaknesses in man. Also, to show you that God uses all those weak points in our life for the benefit of helping others. We'll get to that too. And then there's another. It also is a place to be able to give you an understanding of who I am, Kent Simpson, from the beginning to the end, to the present. And from that, you can make your decision whether you want to be a part of the PMT or not. The campus, the facility that we will put together, this place where you live, where you work, where you worship. I don't think it would be fair to you to come into a place that you didn't know who I was inside and out. So I'm being very transparent for that very purpose. Some people will say, well, I don't want anything to do with that guy. His life wasn't perfect like I expected it to be. Well, that's fine. You need to go find somebody whose life is perfect. And if you'll look real hard, you'll find the only one, Jesus Christ. He's the only one that's perfect. So with that, let me go back to what I put into the article that went out in preparation for this message today. And it was a bad place in my life. And it seems like what God's doing now is I get into one of these parts of the series and go into detail. And then after I'm done, he'll bring back something to my remembrance that I'd long since forgotten that's very important. And I think, okay, God, I'll add it in on the front end of the next week. So that's what I've been doing. And that's why I'm talking about something that happened when I was 13, when we're going to be talking about something when I was 25, 26, and 27. But right now I want to go back just to that point to when I was 13. When I was 13, as I said in the article, I was very depressed. I didn't know it at the time, but for the previous 2 years before that particular time in my life, I'd been looking at all the National Geographics, and in the back of the National Geographic, they had a list of military schools in different parts of the country. I would write them and ask them for material. They'd send me brochures. They'd send me different informational pieces about their military school. And I didn't know why I wanted to go to military school until some years later. And essentially, it was because I needed some stability in my life. My parents had, I lost my mother when I was 9. My parents had been moved around. I had a stepmother. We just discovered at that same time at 13 that my half-sister, my stepmother's firstborn by my dad, came down with leukemia at the age of 2 years old. We found out she had leukemia. So it was really a difficult time. Those moves, every time we made a move, I didn't know anybody because we always moved at the end of the school year. And there was only one time that we only moved in the middle of the year, and that was my junior year. But the fact is that God uses all these things for a purpose. He uses it to be able to bring you back to those times where you felt at your lowest. And at this particular point in time in my life at 13, I felt at my lowest. I didn't know what to do. I had no friends. I was bored stiff. I didn't know what to do about my life. I didn't know when I was in trouble or when I wasn't in trouble. My dad was gone 6 days out of the week on the road. He was traveling salesman for Motorola. And my stepmom taught school. So, we were in and out of different people's homes and really had very little stability. So that's why I wanted to go to military school. When it came to the place to where my dad just said, look, there's no way I can send you to military school, it just broke my heart. I felt like I'd just been shoved under the bus again. And I didn't really realize how heavy of this burden was. But some of you maybe be able to identify with suicide and that spirit of suicide. And that's one point I want to really stress. One of the reasons why I believe, and I truly believe this, I know it, I can't say it without saying it's a fact, that God allowed me to go through or even put me into a lot of these situations to where I would be knowing of what that spirit's all about. Various spirits have different effects on different people for the same purpose, as it says in John 10:10. Satan comes to steal, to kill, and destroy. And he can do it in a lot of different ways. But it usually starts, most always starts, in the mind, with a thought. And so evidently this thought had grown to the place to where I went and found my dad's pistol, went back into my bedroom, shut the door, and I had a good-sized mirror on the opposite wall of where I was standing, and I watched myself as I put the pistol to my head, and as I pulled the trigger, something pulled my arm down, and the bullet just barely grazed, went through my hair, but didn't bring blood, didn't scratch my skin. But at the same time, what happened is I just fell on the bed. It was like all of the stress and all the pressure just fell off of me. And I just fell into the bed, just totally collapsed. Now, what happened after that was my stepmom and my sisters, two of them, my real sister and my half-sister. The half-sister was only 2 years old, so she really didn't know what was going on. But they came running, opened up my bedroom door, and saw me laying on the bed. And now, then they see the gun. Well, automatically they think, oh no, he's done the ultimate. He's done the most hideous thing possible. He shot himself in the head. So they go out the front door, screaming to the top of the lungs, and the neighbor next door was mowing his lawn. Well, I guess they started running toward him. He turned off the mower, and then next thing I know, he's running into the bedroom where I'm laying on the bed. He looks at me real quick, grabs the gun, and runs out of the bedroom. And he goes to his house and hides the gun. I find this out later, what he did with the gun. Well, nothing was ever said. Nobody ever brought it to my attention except the neighbor next door. He told me, he said, look, he said, I want to tell you something. I'm a police officer. He said, I'm supposed to, by my official capacity, I'm required to report this attempt on your life that you made. But I'm not going to, because if I do, they'll put you in an insane asylum. So we're going to keep this quiet. We're not going to tell anybody about it, right? I said, okay. I thought, all right, whatever you got to do. And then nobody ever said anything else about it. And I thought, this is odd, Here I've, almost killed myself, and nobody seems to care. So that even made it more difficult to deal with, even though all the stress had left, and I'd already made up my mind there, I'll never do that again, because it was gone. That spirit had left. Now, what pulled my arm down can only be to your imagination. But I know from a lot of things in my life, I've always had angels around me and seeing many things happen in my life. So it only could be that angel jerked my arm down to keep me from actually taking my own life. Now, why didn't he do that for everybody? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But the fact is that nothing was said. And that really concerned me. Like we're just going to sweep this under the rug like it never happened and not talk about it. Really, what I needed was somebody to listen to me, somebody to talk to me about it, but that wasn't going to happen. A few, weeks, maybe a month later, my stepmom sat me down. She said, listen, she sat me down at the kitchen table. She says, listen, I told your dad what you did, and he laid his head down on the table and started crying. Shame on you for what you tried to do, what you did to your dad. Look what you did to your daddy. And I thought, look what I did to my daddy. I mean, what about me? And that's kind of the way it was in my household growing up for me and my sister. We were just kind of the loose pegs that were not fitting into the family. And it was kind of a constant thing. All that has a purpose. All of this has a reason. If you think of it this way, everybody who's prophetic has been shunned from something or everything. You'll find that it's difficult to fit in a local church because people within the local church pick up something in you. Their spirit in them picks up something that's in you that frightens them. I have had many horrible experiences trying to be a part of a church, only to find out later that they were scared that I would see something in their life they didn't want anybody to know. Well, it's not in my forte, or my manifesto of operation is not to tell people what other people have done. That's not what I do. They can confess their own sins. I don't need to confess them for them. But, it's like, for example, one church that really had a hard time. The first day I walked into the church, I was being brought in as one of the ministers that would be ministering there for a period of time, and that I was probably going to be moving to that city, and that I would probably become a member of that church. Well, the first thing that happened is, as I got in the foyer, this one elder came up to me, and everybody else kept going into the sanctuary, so it was just me and him out in the foyer. And he begins to tell me about his horrible life as a child, living in New Mexico in a kind of a mud hut with dirt floors, and being molested by his uncle. And I'm thinking, why is this man telling me this? I mean, he's just in my face about it. Like, why are you telling me? I don't have anything to do with this, but I let him say his piece just to get it off his mind. I thought maybe he just need to tell somebody about it, but the way he was telling it was like he told everybody. But I found out later he hadn't. But it was this same elder that began to come against me, came against my brother-in-law, who's the pastor of the church, and he made it real difficult. In fact, he even got to the place to where he called a locksmith out, had the locks all changed on the church, and put a for sale sign in front of the church building if he was going to sell it. I thought, well, you can't do that. It's just not legal. But this guy was just going nuts. Well, come to find out, he had called me a couple times during all this situation. And at one point in time, he had a stepson that he had adopted, and not a stepson, he is a young man he adopted when he was a child, and he was having some real problems with him, and he called me up because he was going to have to go to the police station, so he needed me to come open up the church for that Sunday morning because he was going to be late getting him out of jail. Well, I didn't put two and two together yet until God started talking to me about it, and then the Lord says, you know why he told you all that stuff about himself? You know why he's got a son that he's adopted? Put two and two together. It doesn't take very long to figure that one out. So the reason why he was doing everything he was doing to try to shut the church down is to get me out of town. In fact, he called the old pastor who had moved to Georgia and told him, he got the word out that he was coming back to run me out of town. And I was told that was going to happen. I said, well, I'm here. He can try. Well, that pastor, as he was packing up his family, getting ready to leave out of the driveway, he had a heart attack. And he's still in Georgia today, all these years later. So I'm just saying, all these things have pertinence. I'm not just telling you all this stuff just to get you to feel sorry for me, anything like that. That's not it. I want you to understand everything in your life has purpose, but you have to find out what that purpose is. You can't just mark it up as just bad luck or just that's just the way it is. No, look in deeper. There's always something deeper in there that will help you to be able to gather understanding and know more about who you are and what you're created to be and what you're created to do. Now, with that said, I'm going to take it right back up from my 13 years old up to my situation after I've been divorced the second time. Yeah, I've been divorced the second time, but this time I filed a divorce for adultery. I should have filed a divorce for adultery the first time, but I just couldn't go through bare thinking getting a divorce. That was just something that just didn't seem like an option at all in life. But it happened to me anyway. And then the second time, my second wife, she had an affair with one of my best friends who was a tennis buddy. We played tennis all the time, and that when I was in the oil field, working in the oil fields, and so that was over. And there was a lot of things that I talked about that in last week's message. So if you want to know about that, just look at part 5, and you'll find out more about that one. But I'm going into a situation now where my dad wanting me to moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma from Odessa, Texas. Well, that's a good ways. I mean, that's a lot of miles. But he kept telling me that it's real prosperous, and everything bad's happened in Odessa already, so I need to get out of there anyway. And I packed up everything, sold my house, and I'd bought a new Corvette, and so I'm headed to Tulsa. And I get to Tulsa, and I hadn't seen my family in 7 years. In fact, we went 7 years. My dad never called me. I never called him. It's just that our relationship wasn't there. We just didn't really have a relationship. But as I'm staying with them just a little while to get my bearings straight, figure out what I'm going to do, because I've been in banking, got out of banking, worked in newspaper business a couple of times, got in and out of that, and then I last worked in the oil field, and I got out of that, and I decided I want to do the oil field work again. So I'm trying to figure out who I am. So this is what I did. I took out one of those spiral notebooks, and I sat down at the credenza and started writing out my life, just trying to figure out what is the pattern of my life. What am I to do? What am I supposed to do in this life? What am I created to be? And I started out writing, now that I'm in the quarter century of my life, because I'm 25, you see, quarter of a century, get it? Well, that sounded horrible at the time. A quarter of a century. Oh my, I'm just so old. I thought 25. But really, a lot had gone by in that 25 years. And I was really trying to get some direction in my life. So I thought, okay, I'm going to change it. I moved into a new state. I moved into a new town. I'm going to start all over again to try to find out what's the best thing for me to do. So I found a job at a bank and went back into banking, and that was okay. It doesn't make a lot of money, not like the oil field, but at least it was stable and it was clean work. And so I started working in a bank, and I was driving a new Corvette, single, working in a bank. Yeah, I was in trouble. You can mark that down for sure, because it didn't take long before it got out that, hey, we got a single guy that's a bank officer, and he's got a Corvette, and la-di-da. Well, I didn't realize I was really kind of naive. No, I was a lot naive. I had no idea what to expect. But these are just a few of the things that happened. Like I said, I wanted to start life fresh and anew, so I started going to First Baptist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I joined a singles group. First time I'd ever been part of a singles group, but I didn't realize that thing was just a meat market. There was nothing about God in it that I could see. There was 400 singles in that group that were between the ages, I think, of 21 and 35. And I think that was 35. I think it could have been 36. I don't know. But it was just all about who could be with who for whatever reason. And the reasons usually weren't good. I thought, there's no God in this. I don't want this. If I'm going to live that kind of life, I know how to live it without having to be part of the church and be a hypocrite. So I don't want that. So I got out of that and just decided, well, I don't know what I'm going to do now, because I thought I had some hope in the comfort and security of the religious Baptist church that I had always been a part of, but wasn't so. So I dropped out of the church, and I got to thinking, I really like being married, but I really hate what marriage life can do to you if it goes wrong. So I'm thinking, okay, what's the best thing I can do? After my first divorce, I felt, well, here's somebody that wants me more than I want them. And I'm not really interested in getting married again. I really don't have a love for him, anything like that. But this guy would not leave me alone. I mean, she just followed me everywhere. So I thought, well, okay, maybe it'll work out if somebody loves me more than I love them. Kind of a stupid thought, but, I had not a lot to work with anyway. I really didn't have any parental oversight in this, or somebody I could talk to about it. And I don't know if you get the right answer anyway in that kind of situation, because most everybody that I knew had been married for 100 years or more. And, they just don't know. That's just stupid. That's just what you do. You get married, you stay together. But you don't always have the control of that. That's not always the option that's available to you. So as I continued to try to look in the situation a little further, I thought, well, maybe a country girl would work. Raised out in the country, because everybody I'd known before were in the city. So here's my new philosophy. Maybe I need a country girl. Maybe that's what I need. Well, it wasn't too many weeks I'd been working at the bank that this one young lady who was fairly attractive would come in the bank, and she would apply for a loan, and she kept trying to come in and apply for a loan, and she went to one officer to another officer, and I thought, well, that's kind of crazy because she's not really gonna get approved because she's already got a file in here. It's already been turned down once or twice. So one day, one of the officers came over and came into my office, said, "This lady wants to look at buying your car." I put my Corvette up for sale because I thought, well, if I get rid of this thing, maybe that'll help some of my life and put me in some kind of stability with some peace. And so she wanted to look at buying my car. Okay, well, I thought, all right, she wanted to test drive it. So we get in the car to test drive. Well, next thing we know, she's wanting to go out. That's the only reason she wanted to do that, is try to find out. She's trying to get me to make the loan for her, or try to get to where she can see me for a loan. She never did get around to me. But she thought, well, maybe she can buy my car because her sister-in-law, or not sister-in-law, but a friend that became later her sister-in-law, worked in the bank and was telling her everything that's going on, what I did, and how to get to my office. So she got to my office through that method. And so we went on a date. Well, I found out her dad has a ranch. She grew up in the country, and she has 5 siblings. And I thought, okay, here's a good-sized family, country living. That's got to be good. So it wasn't too long before we were married. And I built a house right across the highway, or across the road from her parents' house. And that was good for a little while. I started raising cattle and still working at the bank because I had some good hours where I could do that. And then I started working on the father-in-law's ranch because he bought a new ranch up in a few miles north of, up almost on the Kansas border. And it was a big spread, a lot of cattle, a lot of farming, and he wanted me to come help him. So every weekend, that's where we go up there to work, and every holiday I'd work, and every vacation I work on the ranch. Well, that was kind of boring, I think, for my wife. She was wanting to get away from all that. She wanted to live the city life, but that wasn't going to happen because I was really into the country living. And then out of that whole situation, I think it was the second year we were married, we had a child, and that was my firstborn, and I was very happy, very pleased, that now I'm back in the Baptist church because I'm married, and the Baptist church was just right up the road from the house, little country Baptist church, and got to know everybody pretty well. It didn't take long in that community, and everything seemed to be going good. I thought it was anyway. And then we got to the place to where, it was just a routine of sorts, going to work, going to the ranch, and I thought things were going well myself. I had to go back to college for a 2 weeks crash course semester in banking, and at University of Oklahoma in Norman. And so that 2 weeks I was in Norman, and everything changed. Valentine's Day came on that February 14th. While I was at school, I was tied down to the books. I was working. I didn't know exactly what day it was because I wasn't coming into the desk and turning the calendar to find out what day it was. Well, I found out the next day that it was Valentine's Day. I hadn't ordered flowers. I hadn't done anything. So I had a secretary. I thought I could, help me out here. I've been trying to call the florist on every break we have out of every class. I can't get through. The line's busy. So I asked her, I said, would you mind ordering some flowers for me and have them deliver them to my wife? My wife's office, she worked at a finance company, and it was just a few doors down from the bank. And so she said, yeah, I'll take care of it. Well, when I got home, I was in big trouble, and I didn't know why. I had no idea why in the world I'm in so much trouble. But come to find out later, my secretary took the flowers to my wife directly and said, I think these are for you, but they were given to me and instead. And I thought, oh, that's why she's mad. Yeah, I can understand now why she's mad. But then I found out a whole lot of other stuff that she was doing, my secretary, that is. She was telling her all kinds of things. She was married, but she had it in her mind, just like my second wife who worked at the bank, that she was going to leave her husband and marry me. I don't know why. I'm not that big a commodity, I didn't think. I still don't think so today either, but it was just the way it was. And so I found out a lot of things were happening that really, really made me try to figure out how am I going to work this out. But I was really naive. In fact, my secretary made a birthday cake for my daughter when her birthday came around, and it was of a ranch, and it was called the name of the ranch of what my daughter was name was. And so I thought it was a good idea, and I took it home. Well, that made my wife furious. Well, you can understand why. Like I said, stupid man doesn't understand, what things will set off a trigger that will usually wind up taking you out if you're not careful. Well, I made that mistake of doing that. I wasn't doing anything disgustingly bad. I mean, it was just stupid things I was doing that made the situation even worse. So then I got to the place to where I thought, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about this situation? I don't know what's happening. But she continued to be mad, and I kept asking her, what is wrong now? What's happened now? What did I do now? Well, that's all I'd hear. I thought that was my middle name, Because every time I'd ask, I was always supposed to know. Well, we got to the place to where, it was just not working out. And so we went and got a counselor. Went to a counselor, and we went separately. And so I'm paying for all this, and she's moved out of the house with the child, and I'm just sick as I can be, man. It's just about to tear me up. Because now you got a baby involved. Now you got a child. She's 2 years old. And it's just ridiculous that you're having to go through this, and, you don't know what to do. So the counselor was the last hope. One of my friends at bank had suggested that, said it worked for him. Come to find out, the reason why he was going to see a counselor, because the secretary was after him, and it caused problems in his marriage. And then later he said, well, the only reason she is coming to me is because she knew you and I were best friends and watched football and stuff. He said, you remember the time you were over where I was kicked out and I was living in that trailer? He said, you came over to watch football, and then she calls and she wanted to know if I was there. He said, well, she only wanted to know if you're there because she was coming because you were there, but then you left. And so I said, well, yeah, I wasn't going to interfere with what's going on with you. The three's a crowd, I didn't want to be around all that. So anyway, it was just a bad situation. But what I found out later was that, and the way I found out was this: we're divorced now. I was really trying to work it out, but it wasn't working out, and I had a job offer come up in another city, which is 120 miles away, in Ponca City, Oklahoma. So I go to Ponca City, Oklahoma, to go to work at this bank with two other guys at the bank that I worked at there in Tulsa. So we all three left pretty much the same time to go up there. Well, we went one right after another. I was the last one in. But I'm sitting talking to my wife about moving to Ponca City and starting over. Well, she said she's going to do that. Well, I saw the counselor one more time before I left to go to Ponca City with a truckload of stuff. And he asked a question. He says, well, he made a statement. He says, your wife likes roses. I said, she does? He said, yeah, she likes roses a lot. I said, okay. I thought, what's that supposed to mean? Supposed to get her roses or something? And he didn't say any more about it. So I thought, well, that's kind of quirky. Wrote the man another check. It was getting expensive doing that counseling stuff. So I'm off to Ponca City. She's supposed to move up there with me. And now I've got visitation rights. Well, I'd have to drive 120 miles to see my daughter and drive 120 miles back to my place, and then 120 miles to take her home, and 2 days later, and 120 miles back. So it's quite a ride. But one of the times we're riding in the suburban area of Tulsa, and Tulsa's not a small town; it's 200,000 or so. And all of a sudden, my daughter turns out to the right window of the vehicle and says, Doyle lives over there. And I thought, Doyle? Who's Doyle? And she says, yeah, Doyle lives over there. I said, oh, well, what's his name? Doyle Rose. I thought, wait a minute. Something started clicking there. Like, Rose, she likes roses. Okay, all right. Maybe there's something there. Well, the next visitation that came around, I was at my parents', and I was getting things ready to go pick my daughter up, and the phone rang. My stepmother comes and tells me, says, hey, uh, your daughter's mom just called and said you're not going to be able to pick her up because she had an emergency come up and she had to go take care of it. I thought, what kind of emergency? I don't know. She said some of her friend broke her arm. She had to take her to the hospital. I said, oh, well. I was not happy because, here I've taken the whole plan to be with my daughter and not going to get to see her this trip. And so I just was driving, and all of a sudden I went down that same street where my daughter said Doyle is over there. I thought, I'm going to drive down that area. Well, I drove up and down the streets in this little addition. Well, it's a pretty good sized addition, actually. And all of a sudden I see my ex's car sitting in front of a house, but the windows are all fogged up, like dew from nobody's been driving it. So I thought, well, I'll just go over and say hello. I mean, she's not even supposed to be in town. She's supposed to be taking this friend to the hospital that lives in another city. Well, I get up there and nobody answers the door. Nobody's there. And so I just put my bank card in the screen door and go back to Ponca City. Well, then all of a sudden everything starts up, man. Everything gets all turned out which way. And Doyle calls me. He's all upset. Said, man, you got to get your daughter out of this situation. You've scared your ex-wife to death. Now she's got to move from me. She's living with me. Now she's going to move out, and she keeps moving around to different places. You got to get your daughter out of this mess. I said, well, why don't you help me? He said, oh, man, I can't do that. I said, how am I supposed to do this if you're not going to help me? Because you're my only witness. He said, well, I said, I can't do it. He said, I'm a popular DJ in Tulsa, and if that got out about what I'm doing, it would be real bad for me. And I said, well, what about my daughter? You're concerned about her, aren't you? Anyway, I said, let's talk next week. And so he said, okay. We set up a time to talk again. And this time I had one of the friends that was in banking that had moved. We all three had moved from Tulsa to Ponca City. And I told him, I said, you stay in the second bedroom on the extension phone and just listen as I call this guy up, okay? He said, yeah. I'm going to walk him through the whole thing. So he spilled the beans about everything again, because this guy's really hurting. He's heartbroken, and he's mad, he's angry. He wants her back, but she left all the baby stuff there at the house, and he just feels like things aren't good, and which they weren't. But I walked him through the whole thing again. I said, now you're going to help me? And he said, no. I said, well, what if I have you subpoenaed? He says, I won't say anything. He said, I'm not going to testify to that. I said, well, you'll be perjuring yourself. And he said, what do you mean? I said, Steve was my friend on the other line. I said, Steve, did you hear all of what was said today? He said, yeah. Are you ready to testify? He said, yeah. Oh, man, this guy was just, he was just undone. So we went to trial. And the attorney said that I would have full custody if she didn't take care of the situation right away, get settled down, or if anything happened that she's ever back in any court under any judge at any point in time about anything concerning this daughter of mine, I'd automatically get full custody. Well, she had some guy who was also named Doyle, not the same one, a different guy, and he was a manager of a mortgage company, and he told her that if he would help her out and pay for the attorney and get this all cleared up if she'd marry him. So he got it turned around where she didn't lose the daughter right then, so they got married. He turned out to be a real winner. Not so, a pretty bad guy. Anyway, my point is, here we go again. There was a mutual friend between my secretary and my wife at the time that my secretary would tell her friend, who was a mutual friend, named Bonnie Jean, by the way, tell Bonnie Jean everything that was going on that wasn't going on, lying to her, and she would tell my wife all these hideous things that were supposed to be going on between my secretary and I. Well, I didn't know all this until some time later. So anyway, I'm in Ponca City. I'm divorced. I've already tried to get my daughter. I can't get my daughter. And then my old secretary calls me up and says, I'm divorced now, and I would like to see you. My daughter's with her husband right now, which my daughter and her daughter were the same age. She said, can I come up there and see you? And I said, well, we're having an event in the bank that, requires you to have someone with you. So I said, if you want to do that, it's a banking thing. So if you want to come be a part of that, that'll be fine. So she came up there, and then she began to tell me, I said, what I brought up, I said, this Bonnie Jean that my ex talks about, she talked about her even before we were married. And I never met the person. I think she's a fictitious person. I don't think she even exists. She said, oh, no, she exists. She's a friend of mine. I said, she is? She says, yeah, that's how I got all this information to your ex. And all of a sudden she stopped. I said, wait a minute. You've been telling her stuff that she told my wife that wasn't true? And she just kind of pale white, sheepishly ducked her head. I was furious. I was just so angry. I said, look, I want you out of this house. I don't want to ever see you again. And I'm going to go in the garage, and when I come back out of this garage, you better be gone. Well, when I came back out of the garage, she was gone. But I put a few holes in the wall because I was really mad. It was silly, but that was just the situation that I was in. And I realized, man, you got to be careful. People will deceive you. They'll do all kinds of cunning things. They'll do things that you just can't believe to mess up your life. So you really got to have discernment. You really got to have discernment of people. This is one of the things I've learned before ever becoming a minister, was that people aren't always who you think they are. You got to look into the root of that person. What's really in that person? And really, you got to have the ability to be able to hear God, to know, to see what God sees, what God wants to show you. Because all this stuff that I went through, which was painful, no doubt, it was painful as it could be, painful to my daughter. It was still all part of making and shaping and molding me to be somebody who could be very sensitive, even without even seeing someone. I could sense it, even if they sent an offering in an envelope. I would get the envelope. As soon as I opened up that envelope, I would start getting things from God about that person. Sometimes it was just the feeling of some pain that I'd gone through in my life that I could directly point to the event of where that pain came from when I was going through this or that. And I would write on the back of that envelope just what it was. It doesn't take very long. The spirit of deception, or it was the agony of rejection, whatever it might be. That's what I had to go on, because all I needed was a word from God, right? Because once you give the word, the rest of it comes flowing out, and a lot more information comes out than you're ready to even know about. You're just a reciprocal of God's message. That's all you are. But without having all of these events, I could not relate to people. I mean, I went through death. I went through suicide. I went through loss of marriages. I went through all different kinds of deceitful things that happened. And I'm not even done, people. I'm only at 27 years old in this thing, and it really starts to domino later on in my banking life, because really I was working up to a point to where God was going to move me into the ministry one way or another. And I'll get to that point at some point in time. But all these things have a lot to do with what happens in your past. Look at it. Ask God about it. I mean, a lot of people just blow it off. They just say, well, it's just what it is. Just, let it go. It's water under the bridge. All those sayings that we've heard. No. There's a purpose for it. Learn from it. Experience the benefit of what that crushing brought. Because, you can only get wine out of a grape when the grape is crushed. And a lot of these things that happen to us that are crushing to our emotions, crushing to our psyche, crushing to our heart, are all part of the process of getting something greater out of us, something that is useful for life and the life of others. So in this case, that helped me tremendously to be able to see what it was. And at this point in time in my life now, I can see somebody going through something and not even know their name, not know anything about them, but I can see them across the way in a restaurant, and I know exactly what they're going through. I know exactly what they're feeling, because I feel it. I pick it up. And that's something we can develop in our own areas of whatever gifting God's given you. Because everybody has a measure of Christ living within them. And if you've got a measure of Christ living within you, there's something in there you need to investigate. You need to find out what it is. Seek, and he shall be found. Knock, and he shall open the door. His favorite game is hide and seek. Sometimes it becomes very challenging trying to find out, God, what is it that you're doing right now? He might not tell you right away. He might tell you, will you trust me with this experience, without ever telling you why? But I've never settled for that. I just said, Lord, you don't have to tell me today, but one day I want to know. I want to know. And he's always been faithful to tell me why it happened that way, how it got that way, even to the point to where he would even have people confess it right to me out of their own mouth when they were trying to keep it a secret all these years. Have you ever had that happen? Somebody just all of a sudden just blab out and uncontrollably tell you something that they know that they shouldn't have said, but they couldn't control themselves. It just came out without them even having the decision to make whether it was going to come out of their mouth or not. And that's part of what God does for you. He's a lot more for us than we realize. We limit God so much in the way we think and what we do. Our ways have to be his ways, and our thoughts must be his thoughts. But you can know. People say, well, we'll never know. That's not true. I know Isaiah said, our ways are not his ways and our thoughts are not his thoughts. But it also says in Romans, we shall have our minds renewed so that they will line up with his thoughts and his ways. And with that, I will leave it to you until next week for something even more challenging for you to swallow. And one more thing before I leave out, because I know if I don't, I'll have to say it next week. You know that same secretary that was at the bank that destroyed my marriage with and caused me to lose my daughter? And, you know, it was whenever years later, many years later, I became a widower, and which is Savannah's mom. She passed away after 18 years. And do you know that my secretary from all that way back called me up after the funeral trying to find out if I was available? Can you believe that? I thought, what gall you have. How do you even think that would be possible? There's no way. No way. So God will always protect you in his ways that he does things. And he'll always show you things before you ever even get into them a lot of times to prepare you. But don't ignore him. He comes in very gently. Sometimes it's a very small voice. But really, there can be salvaging of many, many tears if you just pray, hear, and obey. With that said, I'll leave you today. May you be blessed and let God take care of the rest. So be it. Amen.